Now,
Uh,
please notice
okay,
it is
so
our team that's here first.
okay. Well, welcome to session 3, everyone. We're going to talk about IRB's institutional review boards today, which brings us to points of ethics, and we'll also go over some protocols for literature review. Let me just make one other adjustment here. Let me see. Okay. Just trying to. I just want to test the video. Please tell me. I'm going to run a brief, just a couple of seconds. Tell me if you can see and hear this okay.
Institutional Review Boards, IRBs.
Okay, how'd that work?
IRBs, Institutional Review Boards. Got it.
Okay,
Worry,
okay.
actually.
It's just
What's that?
you get it as well. It's just that it's foggy. It's not a clear.
It looks like a vision test. It's like the font is changing sizes.
Okay, well, you know, there's not big reading at the 10-point font on this. It's big type, and the narrative really carries it. And the reason I ask is because it's a long way to transmit from my computer to all of yours, and there's a lot of internet traffic that can corrupt something like streaming a video. I'm going to be running 6 videos today. They're brief, just a few minutes each. And if for whatever reason you're not seeing them clearly, they're all downloadable from Canvas for session 3. You'll see them all collected there, and you can watch all of those. They're quick downloads. Well, not quick, but you'll be able to get everything. If the audio or video breaks down, don't fuss. Okay, so here's our agenda for today, and I'll allocate whatever time is left over for your group work. I'll give you some guidance on where your group should be and what they should be doing these days. Regarding assignment 1, any questions that I can pick up, answer regarding our first assignment? Okay, I guess that was fairly straightforward. Now, I've rescheduled.
It's nice that you have all 3 of us are in the same group, so you have a collaborative, no questions asked.
Okay. I wanted you to know that I've rescheduled the R homework. The first assignment is due at session 9, not session 4. And my rationale there is this is when I will be doing the actual online lessons, and I don't want you skating solo on this, getting your answers out of a book. So you're welcome to download revision 2 of the syllabus from the Canvas site. That's the only real change, and I'll do full in-class demonstration of each statistical function prior to the week that it's due, and that should keep you on top of things. So actually, it says update scheduled by next session. You can pick up the new syllabus now. The only thing different is the due dates for the R assignments. Oh, also pick up the R homework assignments because I've moved some of them around. 1 and 5 are in the same place, but 2, 3, and 4, I've resequenced those. So I want you to be doing the right assignment at the right date, and this is to help ease the entire process. Okay, so yes, question.
So assignment 1 is still due February 13th, but our homework was moved. Is that correct?
Right. Correct. So assignment 1 is the individual assignment that we talked about early on. But the R homework, there's 5 R homework assignments. Those aren't due. Forget about session 4. The first one is due session 9, and you'll see that in the syllabus. I've changed the dates, and then also go in and pick up the new R assignments. They're the same assignments, but I've resequenced them so they follow the lecture a little bit closer, and that'll keep you on track. I'll be demonstrating on one data set, but you'll be carrying out your calculations on another. But I'll point out the only thing that's different is change the file name of the variable names. You'll be totally on track. I'll demo and explain everything. And of course, you have the ARC syntax reference sheet, so you're not even having to learn the coding of the R language, which is really fussy. You miss it by one character, you get a very arcane error message that can just be really frustrating. But if you follow through and copy and paste out of the prepared document, drop that into R and just change the file name and the variable name, bam, you got results. It's like magic. Okay. Let's talk a little about institutional review boards. Anyone ever heard of institutional review boards or IRB before? Anyone at all? Can someone give a little summary of what you know about IRBs and what they do? Why do they exist? What are they?
Any organization that involved in research involving human beings, schools, hospitals, medical research centers, things like that, have to do what they call the institutional review boards. And really, it's to ensure that the research that is being done follows certain ethical guidelines, does minimal amount of harm to the test subjects. For instance, asking a question that might be a little bit emotionally uncomfortable, where you're revealing a part of your childhood, and the level of harm in that compared to, let's say, with the Milford experiment, where you think you're applying electric shock to somebody giving the wrong answer to a question.
Right. So thank you. Very thorough. Essentially, it's a board of individuals, a multidisciplinary group that looks over research proposals before they're authorized to be executed. And they're looking for the protection of the human subjects. And as you mentioned, the Milgram experiment didn't really physically harm anyone, but it caused devastating emotional impact and cost to the participants, many of whom went home with the knowledge, like, gee, under the right conditions, like a guy holding a clipboard saying, push the button, I could kill a person. Go live the rest of your life with that in your head. And other experiments like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where disadvantaged African American males were injected unknowingly with syphilis, just to see what happens in the long run. There was no treatment for the disease, and then even when there was a treatment, they didn't administer it, just to see how bad gets. Devastating. And so it was experiments along these lines that breached ethical boundaries, that brought this to the attention of universities, ethicists, other researchers, thinking, just because you have a grant or some money, you can't just put an ad in the paper, bring people in, and do things to them. We need a board that oversees that these people will be respected and will be taken care of, that we do not harm them on the way to getting our research answers. So again, IRBs are found within universities that typically conduct research, social science agencies, hospitals, research institutions. There's also independent IRBs. So if you're in a hospital that doesn't have an IRB and you want to carry out research and the powers that be say, you can contract an independent IRB or connect with a university and pay them to review your work. So let's take a look at the first video. Again, if these videos are just coming through junky, you're welcome to watch them after class. They're only a few minutes each. You can download them all off of Canvas. So let's take a look at this first one on how IRBs protect human subjects. Okay, here we go.
Institutional Review Boards, IRBs. A set of federal regulations known as the Common Rule protects people who participate in federally funded research. The regulations require that a committee review and approve a study before allowing people to enroll in the research. This video explains the role of these committees, which are called Institutional Review Boards, or IRBs. What is an IRB? An IRB is a committee that reviews research studies to make sure that they follow ethical standards and regulations for research with people. In addition to the common rule, there are regulations to protect people who may need more protection, such as prisoners and children. When a research study involves human participants, researchers submit the proposed study to an IRB for review. The IRB looks at many different aspects of the study to make sure it meets the requirements for protecting those people. If it doesn't, the IRB will not approve it until the necessary changes are made. IRB review does not always happen at the institution doing the research. Many institutions have their own IRBs that review the research they conduct, but they could also use a commercial IRB or an IRB from another institution. Who is on an IRB? IRBs must have at least 5 members with various backgrounds who can provide different perspectives on the research. Those members must include at least one who is not connected to the institution doing the research, and one who is not a scientist. Each IRB must have members who can review the specific types of research it oversees, and members who know the community where the research takes place. Researchers who serve as IRB members cannot review their own research projects. This helps the IRB make sure its review is independent and free from other interests. What does an IRB do? An IRB reviews proposed research to check and see that participants will be protected according to ethical standards and regulatory requirements. Except for some research that is very low risk, an important role of the IRB is to verify that potential participants have the information they need to make a decision about volunteering for the study. They can understand the study, including information about risks, and they are free to choose whether or not to participate. Much of this is done through the informed consent process. This is when the researchers provide important and relevant information to potential volunteers so that they can decide whether to join the study. In the case of some very low-risk research, the IRB may not require informed consent. When this happens, the IRB still reviews the research to make sure that participants are protected even in the absence of informed consent. The IRB also makes sure that the research is not unnecessarily risky and checks that other protections for participants are in place, including protections for privacy and confidentiality. The IRB can approve a study when these and other requirements are met. After the study starts, the IRB makes sure that participants remain protected according to the approved research plan. IRBs play an important role in protecting research participants, but others share the responsibility as well. Researchers, institutions, sponsors, and even volunteers themselves each play an important part. Does all research require IRB review? Not all research studies require IRB review. For example, the common rule does not require IRB review for studies with samples that are left over from blood tests, as long as the researchers don't know who the samples came from. This is because there is little risk to the privacy and confidentiality of the patients, and the patients do not have to do anything since the samples are leftovers that would otherwise go to waste. There are also regulations that researchers might follow instead of the common rule. For example, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has regulations for developing and testing drugs and other products. These also include protections for research participants. In addition, it is possible that a research study might not fall under any of the federal regulations. An example is research funded by private money from nonprofits or corporations that is not regulated by FDA. Who can address a research volunteer's concerns about protections? If you have questions about a research study you volunteered for, you can ask the research team for more information. But if you have concerns about how you, as a volunteer, are being protected, or if something doesn't seem right, you can also contact the IRB. The IRB's job is to make sure the study meets the ethical standards and federal requirements for research with humans, and that the researcher is doing the study in the way the IRB approved. The IRB's contact information should be on the consent form you received when you initially joined the study. To learn more about participating in research studies, visit www.hhs.gov/about-research-participation.
Okay, so just some basics about IRBs. Basically, they exist to protect people from being harmed emotionally, socially, or physically from their voluntary participation in a research study. Now, the data that we're going to be working with in this class is essentially deemed IRB exempt. Because it's de-identified, meaning it doesn't have anybody's individual identity in it, and essentially you're going to just be reporting overall findings, not the story of any one individual. And so there's essentially nobody's emotional or mental health safety at risk. This data could never be connected back to an individual, and it's going to be overview data, averages, that sort of thing, statistical tests that can never be identified or linked back to any one individual. So there are times when an IRB will review a project and then deem it exempt, as there's nobody at risk here. You're not doing anything to anyone, and there's no way you can disclose anybody's identity because you don't even have it. And they just say, go right ahead and analyze and publish responsibly. And then that's the last you're going to hear from them. Other studies that are considerably more high risk, they may require that you submit quarterly reports discussing your progress and the progress of those involved. So they really keep their finger on the pulse of more critical studies. So here's a question. Do you think IRBs should specifically include people of marginalized groups, meaning minority people? Any thoughts on that? Now, remember, an IRB needs to include more than just scientists and bioethicists. They need to be community members and non-scientists involved. Any thoughts about the wisdom or not a great idea to include groups of individuals from marginalized groups? Sure, go right ahead, anyone.
I think they should include members of marginalized groups, especially if that is the target study is involving. The syphilis experiment in Alabama, if they had included people from the community, say, hey, wait a minute, why are you targeting this type of population, different types of methods? There may have been different types of safeguards implemented to be able to protect the participants, especially since they didn't know what it was. This might have been checked on the IRB level then.
You raise a couple of valuable points. First of all, that would involve informed consent, meaning we're telling you in advance what we intend to do, and are you okay with it, instead of just corralling these people and say, make a fist, we're shooting you with this drug or this disease. Secondly, you raise another point regarding fairness. Syphilis is a sexually transmitted disease, and STDs is an everyone disease. So why were only these people isolated and tested on? All good points. Any other thoughts regarding including marginalized or minority individuals in IRB groups? Okay, so let's move on. Let's shift gears a little and spend some time talking about literature reviews. I'll begin with the first video and we'll have some discussion about it. So let me get us there. Here we go.
Do you need
These
to
are
write a
brief.
literature review but don't know how to begin? Don't worry. That's what we're here for. You'll understand what is a literature review after this video. Welcome back, subscribers, or welcome if this is your first video with us. I'm Jessica from Scribber, here to help you achieve your academic goals. So what is a literature review? It's a critical recap of what has already been researched on a topic. It could be anything from books, journal articles, or other sources. Now let's make it more concrete and see how it works with this research problem. What does social media do to the younger generation's mental health? But why is literature review so important? To find out what's already known about your topic and how other researchers have approached it. Through this, you found out that social media plays a role in affecting younger generation's body image. Second, to give your reader a critical overview of the existing knowledge, which shows how your research fits in. It's good to look at the methodological approaches. Are they comparing the same kind of social media or mental health issues? Third, to find out what's missing from the current knowledge so that you can contribute something original. You can then narrow down to eating disorder and the age group of 16 to 20 because it's not been done before. Nice! Now that we have a solid foundation, you're ready to move on to the 5 steps of writing a good literature review. Click here. I'll see you there.
Okay. Need to find the right. There we are. Okay. So literature review is, again, it's basically to promptly not have to do all the research yourself, is to focus and gather the information that's already been published on the topic. Again, mostly to help you not reinvent the wheel, but to bring you up to speed on what's already known about that topic. And this will pertain to the pairs of variables that you'll be selecting for your future projects for assignments 2 through 4. There'll be pairs of variables involved, and you're going to need to get the backstory on each of those, either individually or how they exist in a single article together. And in terms of the quota, I'm recommending about 2 articles per variable. 1 or 2 articles per variable should help you understand those variables sufficiently to be able to write about it. And then, of course, to have something meaningful to say when you write your results section after you process the statistics. So let's take a look at the next video, is how to write a literature review.
Writing the literature review might be easier than you think. It's only a critical recap of what has already been researched on a topic, so no need to panic. In this video, you'll learn how to write a literature review in 5 simple steps. Hi, I'm Jessica from Scribber, here to help you achieve your academic goals. We also zoomed in on all of the steps outlined in this video in separate videos. Check out the playlist here. Now let's get ready to start writing. Step 1. Search for relevant literature on your topic. In this context, literature just means any academic sources like books or journal articles about your topic. First, you need to search in the right scholarly database, so something like Google Scholar, PubMed, or ScienceDirect. Search your keywords with Boolean operators like these to help you filter and refine the search results. Check out this video to find out how to use them. Step 2. Evaluate and select sources. Unless your topic is super niche, you probably can't read everything that's been written on the topic. Once you've got the sources from step 1, read the abstract to scan whether an article is relevant or not. Also scan the bibliography to find other relevant sources. You should also pay attention to the citation count on Google Scholar. If the count is high, the source is probably important and you should include it. Step 3. Identify themes, debates, and gaps. As you read, take notes and pay attention to the connections between different sources. This way, you can organize your literature review's arguments and structure a lot easier. Here are some things to look for. Trends and patterns in theories, methods, or results. Themes, debates or contradictions, influential studies, and gaps. Step 4. Outline your literature review structure. You can go about your literature review structure in a few ways. It all depends on what you found in the literature and what you want to emphasize. Here are 4 common approaches to structure the literature review. Chronological, that means from older to more recent publications. Thematic, so organized around several key themes. For methodological, you can compare the different research methods being used across studies. As for theoretical, you use it to discuss opposing theories or models. More details in this video. Check it out. And finally, get writing. Make sure your literature review has an introduction, a main body that summarizes and synthesizes the sources, and a conclusion, just like other academic texts. Now let's get your literature review started. To learn more about literature review, click this playlist. I'll see you there.
Okay, so one of the concepts that went by pretty quickly is not everything has to be a unique search. Of course, you use keywords to find what you're looking for, but another way to find literature is within a paper that has got your attention. So, of course, you read the title. If the title looks promising, then you read the abstract, which is about 200-word summary. And if that still gets your attention, then you download the paper, read through that. As you're reading through the paper, you might find a very enlightening passage, something that really hits home. Well, that'll likely have a citation, and then that takes you to the reference section, and that could be the next paper that you're going to be reading. And of course, the reference section will give you the DOI, everything you need to go get that paper. So one good thing can lead to another. I sometimes think of that as snowball research, where this one leads to that one, leads to that one. That's kind of how snowball sampling works, where we ask the participant, hey, do you know anyone else who's a left-handed diabetic? And they say, yeah, I do. And then that's our next person in our study if we're lucky. So one paper can lead to another, and that's not a shortcut, and that's not cheating. That's a very real way of doing research. So not everything needs to kick off with another set of search parameters. Okay, so let's take a look at this next one, is how to search for articles. There's some key tips that you can throw in. And something I want to point out is when you put in your search terms, the database is going to look in 2 big places to see if it's a good match. It may look into the text, but more likely for a literature article, a piece of publication or manuscript, you'll probably look at the title for those words, and then there's also keywords that are not in the title, but synonyms that are relevant to the topic that the author provides. So, for instance, if I was doing a paper on HIV, it may say something like HIV testing among teens, techniques for success. Maybe that's the title of the paper, but I might also include in the keywords things that are relevant but not in the title, like infectious disease, health screenings, adolescence. So those could be other words that you may see the paper pull up on. Let's take a look at this next video. Here we go.
Welcome back, subscribers. Are you ready to start your literature review? Let's zoom in on the first step of writing a good literature review. You need to search for relevant literature. If you don't know what a literature review is, check out this video first. Okay, so obviously you're searching for literature related to your topic. Start with creating a list of keywords on your topic. For example, our topic is social media's impact on the younger generation's body image. So our list of keywords could be mental health, body image, teenager, social media, Facebook, Instagram. Once you've had that list of keywords ready, go to your favorite database. It could be your university's library catalog, PubMed, ScienceDirect, or Google Scholar, which is what we will be using in this video. Now, who doesn't know how to type in their keywords and hit enter? That's for amateurs. I'm about to show you 2 more tricks to instantly narrow down your search and find much more relevant papers. For the first trick, you should first think and write down all the synonyms or subtopics of the keywords you've searched for. In our case, Gen Z, younger generations, and teenagers all represent the age group we're looking for. And here's the pro tip. Use these things called Boolean operators to help us refine the search. You can use these in all different databases. You use AND, so all the keywords have to be included in the results and not just part of the search. Use OR to search for either of the synonyms. And for terms you don't want in your results, for example, if you're searching for the fruit apple and not the tech giant, we can use the minus sign to exclude technology, iPhone, Mac, etc. You can also use double quotation marks to search for results with exact matches. So in this case, for body image and social media. Once you've found a source you think might be useful, make sure to read the abstract before diving in headfirst. You get a glimpse of what the research is about and know if it's relevant to your topic. And when you've found a source that's relevant, check its bibliography and look for source titles that seem related to your topic. Often you'll be able to dig up some gems. To identify the most important publications on your topic, take note of recurring citations. If the same authors, books, or articles keep appearing in your reading, make sure to seek them out. You can also look at how many times the article has been cited on Google Scholar. If the number is high, the article is probably influential in the field. Then you should definitely include it in your literature review. Keep digging and reading, and when you're done, watch this video on how to identify themes, debates, and gaps. I'll see you there!
Okay, so the big point of the literature review is to find out what is already known and warm up your thinking so that you can proceed in an informed way. And this is right along the lines of evidence-based practice. You don't have to make up everything yourself. In fact, you shouldn't. This kind of breaks the rule that we were brought up with in elementary school. Don't look at your neighbor's paper. Well, this is a place where we're saying, look at your neighbor's paper. Your neighbor has been studying this for longer than you came up with the question. And I assure you, just about anything you could ask has already been asked and answered by some research team. And they'd spend years working on it, and you could absorb in a matter of hours what it may have taken decades for a variety of researchers to come up with, and suddenly you're the walking, talking expert on that. And this enables you to move forward meaningfully, clinically, and also in terms of research. And the research we'll be doing in this class, what you're trying to do is bring yourself up to speed as what is known about these variables. So step one, of course, is to search for research studies and other scholarly sources, and then to organize your studies in a way that will allow you to articulate what you found. Now, since you're really limiting yourself to a couple of articles per variable, and there's only 4 variables involved, and some of your teams may recycle a variable in one pair. Maybe age and something. Maybe age and something else might be part of your second question, if it's a unique enough question from your first one, your research study. That.
Are you able to hear me by now? Okay, let's go with this. Just shifted. I lost my telephone connection. If this starts to fail, you have to let me know and I'll shift back to telephone. We'll just see how things go. Technology, so much fun. Okay, so with that, organizing your studies is key because the data is going to come in kind of a chaotic order. You'll read the title, then you go through the abstract, see if that meets your needs. And if that is good, then that's where you would download the thing and do the real reading and highlighting and take some notes. Next step, let's see. Oh, my screen's being weird. There we go. Synthesize your findings. What do these articles add up to communicate? What are they saying to you? And then, of course, critically assess the information. Now, this kind of makes me think of an old joke that Irma Bombeck used to tell, that her and her friends were sitting around one afternoon bragging about their after-school jobs that their kids had. And it comes to her and she says, well, my daughter writes all the obituaries for the local paper. I say, what's so great about that? She says, oh, you think it's easy to get all those people to die in alphabetical order? And the point here is yeah, what a great mind. And the point here is that when you pull the articles and start reading, they're going to come in just a chaotic, just a random order. And then ultimately, it's your job to identify which are the keeper articles and to inflict order on chaos. What order does this go in to tell a cohesive story? And as I said, you're not doing a comprehensive literature review on the phenomenon, just enough to have something meaningful to say about each of the variables. And then highlighting gaps in the information, that's something that really happens with the more comprehensive literature review. That would be the basis for something like a thesis, where you have dozens of research articles. And eventually you will raise the curiosity. You'll become an expert on the topic, and you'll raise the curiosity and say, gee, how come this has never been tried with minority teens? Or how come this has never been tested in this geographical domain? I wonder if it would work. Okay, so question, how do we identify gaps in the available information? Again, I'll just go ahead and answer that, is when you've collected a dozen or so or more. This is where your imagination starts to notice that that information is missing, or maybe a little bit on the obsolete side. So talk about identifying themes and gaps. Let's watch that video.
Hey subscribers, welcome back. I'm Jessica from Scribber. In the last video, we learned how to search for relevant literature. In this video, you'll learn step 2 of writing a good literature review, which is how to identify themes, debates, and gaps in your literature. Now that you have the literature ready, before you start organizing your literature review structure and argument, you need to draw connections and relationships between the sources you've read. Let's recap our topic: social media's impact on the younger generation's body image. Here are 5 things you should look out for and take note of in your sources. Trends and patterns, specifically in theories, methods, and results. So are there clusters of studies that focus on the same aspect of the topic or use the same method? Is there a certain approach or theory that has become more popular over time? In our case, most of the literature on our topic focused on Facebook and Twitter. And in recent literature, there has been an increasing interest in highly visual social media like Instagram and Snapchat. So one important trend in the literature is a changing approach to the type of social media. When it comes to themes, can you spot any concepts or questions that repeat again and again across literature? In our case, we notice the theme of mental health comes up a lot. Many studies find that social media has quite a few negative impacts on mental health. Debates, conflicts, and contradictions. Are there any debates between sources? Perhaps studies that use similar methods but yielded different results? If there's any research that goes against the general consensus, it should be addressed. In our example, some studies suggest that certain types of social media use have no association with body image. So we want to look critically at how they come to that conclusion. Pivotal publications. So any influential studies or theories that absolutely change the direction of the field? Like when the apple dropped on Isaac Newton's head? Take a look at this article and its site count. It's published over a decade ago and focused on mass media, which was era appropriate. Could this be of any use? Now what about this article? And finally, gaps. So what could be missing from the literature? Any weaknesses that need to be addressed? In our literature, we find that very little research has been done on highly visual social media such as Instagram and Snapchat. So this is a gap. On top of that, Most of the literature focuses on females. The research that has been done on male subjects has small sample sizes. So that's another gap we could fill by doing a different type of study on this population. Nice. This will come in super handy when working out the structure of your literature review. Speaking of which, watch this video next.
Okay. Now, in larger studies, it can be useful to organize your findings in some kind of a table. And this is an example of what that would be. A lot of people use Excel to identify the different attributes of their paper and to summarize that, because it's hard once you've read a dozen papers, it's hard to remember who said what about what. Another way to go that I like when I'm coming down to organizing the data is I print these things out, or I'll write them in summary to 3x5 cards. And this enables me to shuffle them around and try to get a logical story to emerge. Because once again, you're inflicting order on chaos. You don't get to really choose the order that things are going to come in. But by the time you want to document this in a way that can be read and it makes sense as you go, you need to shuffle these into place. For instance, you've seen where a statement will be made and there's multiple citations there. That's basically saying these two studies essentially found the same thing, or 3 studies, or however many, and maybe your cards, you would put those 2 side by side, or those few side by side, then move on to the next logical step in your story based on the evidence that's emerging. So there's no wrong way to organize the data. It just needs to be organized, and your reader will never see what you did behind the scenes, whether you use 3x5s or Excel or something really fancy to get the job done. You've just got to get this stuff into some order. Let's see this video detailing the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. Before we do that, could somebody give a definition or example of quantitative, qualitative, or both? Anyone on that?
I think the difference, right, is quantitative is numbers based and qualitative is sort of narrative based. So if we're looking at the example from the video about like social media impacts, quantitative may be like the percentage of teenagers who report a change in body image, but qualitative might be like an open response of like, here's how this has affected me or my friends, or something more anecdotal.
Exactly. And the only thing I add to that, you hit it right on. That's perfect. Quantitative, if you look at it semantically, the root of the word quantitative is quantity, numbers. So we're gathering numbers that can be statistically processed, things that we can count and measure. Qualitative is deeper, richer storytelling. And as you said, we know how many people from our study are using social media. The qualitative study will give us insights as to what are the stories and impact that this is having, because just knowing that 17.2% of this group of the population is using it doesn't tell us too much about, is it doing good or bad, and how are people reacting to this. I personally, I was most of my career has been quantitative research, although I've had the privilege of working on some qualitative projects, and they tell very different stories. In fact, there was one where we launched HIV oral rapid testing at the VA in primary care. Nurses, RNs were administering, and LVNs were administering HIV oral rapid testing and ordering and encoding the results. And this device looks like a pregnancy test stick, except instead of a needle stick, you drag it across the top and bottom gums, and in 20 minutes on the stick, 1 bar, no HIV, 2 bar, and you have a preliminary positive. The enzyme linked immunosorbent assay has shown positive, the ELISA test. And so after 5 years of this, my team went back to the sites that we implemented this at, and we did a quantitative analysis and published those findings showing here's the curve of how tests have gone. It's basically how many tests over these 5 years have taken place. Then we went back to those same sites and implemented a qualitative. So that was, so here's the numbers, but how did you implement this? What worked? What do you wish worked better? That sort of thing. And both provide important news, but very different stories and very different angles on the topic. The hope was that the quantitative demonstrates this works if you do it. Qualitative provides another facility with the information. Is like, this is how you do it, and here's the potholes, and here's the things that make it work, and here's the things that we wish we hadn't done it that way. All valuable stuff. So let's take a look at this video on quantitative versus qualitative. And by the way, the work we're going to be doing here, quantitative, but I want you to see qualitative also. Okay, let's get that video up. Here we go. Last video of the day.
When doing research, you often have to choose between quantitative and qualitative research. In this video, I'll explain the differences between the two. Hi, I'm Jessica from Scribber, here to help you achieve your academic goals. Let's start with the differences between quantitative and qualitative research. Quantitative research allows you to test hypotheses, so you can expect to see data collected with this approach will mainly be expressed in numbers and graphs. It also requires a larger sample size. These numbers are then analyzed through math and statistical analysis. On the other hand, qualitative research allows you to formulate a hypothesis. So yes, opposite to quantitative research, this approach will yield data that's expressed in words and also require fewer respondents. The data is then analyzed by summarizing, categorizing, and interpreting. Alright, now we know the differences, but when to use which? It's very simple. If your goal is to confirm or test a theory or a hypothesis, you're most likely going to opt for the quantitative approach. But if you want to understand or explore an idea, then you should go for the qualitative approach. There's also a third approach, which combines quantitative with qualitative, and this is called the mixed method. Let's see how it applies in a concrete example, shall we? Say we want to find out how satisfied students are in their studies. I'll show you how both approaches can answer this question. If I'm taking the quantitative approach, I can survey 300 students at the university and ask them questions like, on a scale from 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with your professors? With the collected data, I will run a statistical analysis and draw conclusions that might sound something like, on average, students rate their professors 4.4 out of 5. But if I want to go for a qualitative approach, then I can conduct interviews with 15 students and ask them open-ended questions such as, how satisfied are you with your studies? Or, what can be done to improve the study program? Then, I transcribe the interviews and try to find patterns or recurring themes. For example, something like students would like to have more one-on-one guidance from their professors. For the mixed method approach, you first conduct interviews with the students. Through that, you gain new insights and come up with a hypothesis. For example, you learn through interviews that students prefer individual assignments over group projects. Then you test whether this applies to a larger scale of students using survey research. It's also possible to do it the other way around. You can start out with a survey to see the bigger picture, then use interviews to understand the reason behind it. Now, I will go over data collection for both approaches in this video very briefly, but if you want to know more, just check the article in the description. To collect quantitative data, you can, for example, survey people online, in person, or over the phone, conduct experiments, or observe subjects. On the other hand, collecting qualitative data can be quite different. You can do an interview, get a focus group, do a case study, or a literature review. And that's it for this video. If you've learned something, give this video a like, and if you have any question, ask away and I will reply. See you in our next video.
Okay, so valuable stuff. Mixed method typically is more quantitative questions and then some qualitative follow-up. qualitative is very labor intensive, a very different kind of software that we're not even going to touch in this class. If you have just a few responses, you can just kind of eyeball it and see if you can spot some trends. But there is qualitative research that involves full transcription, almost like a movie script of every word that was said by the interviewer and the individual or the focus group. And there's analytic software that will go through and work with you to identify trends and all kinds of interesting stuff going on in the transcription. So based on what you got out of this, do you think you'd be more interested, not in this class, I already revealed we're going quantitative in this class, but think about the value of quantitative or qualitative, and if you were doing a different project, which do you think you might opt for, and what subject matter might that be?
I think I have a question actually in response to that. So I think my instinct would be qualitative, not only because of the math anxiety I've already owned up to in this class, but because I think that works and pairs really nicely with social work, where we are getting people's stories either on a micro or a macro level, every day. But I guess
Sure.
what is our ethical obligation, right? If somebody reports something, like if we were doing a survey of the teenagers, right, who are experiencing body image issues, if it's anonymous, right? What if someone says, I'm a 16-year-old girl and I'm suicidal as a result of, what I see from my peers on Instagram or something like that. And I guess some of this feels a little bit in conflict. Like if you were her therapist, you would know how to proceed. If you were her school counselor, you'd know how to proceed. But I'm curious a little bit, I guess, how this functions in sort of a research relationship.
Once again, you raised some good points, more than one. Absolutely. The practice of social work is predominantly qualitative. We elicit stories through mostly open-ended questions and listening and synthesizing a story. There's very few conversations that involve stacks of numbers or yes/no questions. So this goes back to the IRB. If you're doing a study that involves body image, essentially before you launch that study, you will have done a literature review on what do we know about body image. And what you'd find is that there are some deeply emotional impact. And what we're seeing is that this has a strong effect, presumably, on adolescent girls, because as you grow up, you care less about what other people think and you have a sense of independence. But that age is very vulnerable to peer judgments, especially negative ones. And so this would tell you, you would know in advance that there could be some participants who could be on an emotional, vulnerable edge. And this would mean that in your briefing and in your debriefing, you would have appropriate referrals on hand just in case one of these people catches on fire emotionally, or you see that they're on the edge. You have that sheet prepared. You have the policy prepared. You are ready to act and move. You're not being caught off guard. And so once again, research is great, but in service to the client's research agenda comes beyond second. First thing is the individual's safety, their welfare, their well-being. That always comes first. Does that make sense to what you're asking? So even if the person who's administering the survey is a paraprofessional, they know they are sniffing out for red alerts, that if they say something like this, it takes us down a different question pathway. That is, I feel really bad about myself, bad enough to consider hurting yourself, and they would be routed down a risk assessment pathway and depart from any further questions on the survey. And then at some point they may confer with the supervisor who would say, send her to room 9. I need to speak with her right away. Or give the referral and let's do some talking and follow up and let's come up with a plan and let's assess the risk and do all of that. So yeah, safety is everything all the way through. And we push aside research as soon as it looks like someone is in some kind of a risky situation.
Are assessors usually pre-briefed on how to, if they're not trained up to that level, are they usually that's explained to them prior
Oh,
to the test?
absolutely. Definitely so. So let me just give a very real example. Again, referring back to the work that I did at the VA, it was a research project investigating what is the prevalence of HIV, and it was applied research. Let's take these people who are routed with preliminary positives and get them to care, not just find and count them. Let's do something about this. And we did interventions at homeless shelters here in Los Angeles. And I ran paraprofessionals in the field who I supervised. I was in field with them, but to make it more efficient, all three of us were running tests. And we trained them at our offices in conference rooms through role plays of how do you disclose a negative, a preliminary positive, and an indeterminate test result. And we had scripts for them to understand, what are you trying to communicate? And then we ran role plays where I would be a cooperative, easy to deal with person, a moderately difficult person, and someone who goes into a red alert panic when told their test results. And we coach them on how to work with each of these different levels. And as their supervisor, I was there in the room with them through the whole thing. So, right, nobody flies solo on this unqualified. And that's part of what you would specify in your IRB application. I know we went skating right past that, but an IRB application, you got to know it's more than one page. Typically, these things run about 20 pages, and they're looking for everything. They are asking every what if question under the sun like you couldn't believe, and they're not afraid to kick it back to you and tell you what's unclear and incomplete or missing. Is that all? These are thick as a brick, and it's all about the safety of our dear volunteer participants. So I hope that story actually helps fill in the gaps that we don't fly by the seat of our pants or anyone else's pants. We're very deliberate in what and how we're doing. We want people to be safe. We want our answers, but not at the cost of putting people at risk. Okay, other questions or thoughts on this?
Yes, I noticed that you use the word volunteer. In a case where the participants are being paid, is there still a necessity for an IRB?
Absolutely. In fact, the IRB is very concerned. You can run a study where people are volunteers, and it specifies in the informed consent, you will not be paid. But people are also volunteers if they're being paid. They're considered voluntary participants, because I can't just say, you, David, you are now in my study. Okay, you need to be here at 8 o'clock, and you, no way. I can offer you the opportunity, and you can volunteer to be in or out. And if I make a commitment to pay you a moderate fee for participating, I'm committed to, of course, paying you for that, even if along the road it's an hour and at 50 minutes you say, do I have to finish this? I can't be coercive. I say, no, you don't. And there's no consequence for either participating or not participating, or for completing or withdrawing. And all of that is spelled out in plain language in the informed consent, which is something the IRB reviews. So it's always voluntary. I cannot rope anyone in and say, you're doing this. In fact, it would be considered a conflict of interest because of power differential if I suddenly offered you the opportunity as students in my class to participate in the study that I'm doing. There is an unfair power differential there. And even though I say this won't affect your grade, it could create stress or favorability of those who do and don't. And the IRB would just say, that is a conflict of interest, find other people. So it's, I mean, it even goes down to that level. Other thoughts on this? Is all good thinking. You know, it's essentially the same ethical protocols that we use for appropriately dealing with clients. Is we want to help them, but we can't force them to do anything. They're here voluntarily. You know, at best, we're mental health consultants, and they individuals are completely empowered entities with all the rights and privileges. I'm not here to push people around or make people do things. All I can do is offer opportunities. And if they want to be part of research, they can. And if they don't, I have to smile and say, I just wanted to offer, and you move on. Okay, we're at an hour. So what I'd like to do is take a 5-minute break. Everybody go get a cup of tea or stretch your legs or something. And we'll wrap this up in our second hour. And of course, I will do whatever we have left at the end to give you that time for breakout sessions to talk to your groups, and I'll give you guidance on what the next goal for your breakout groups should be. And we'll go on from there. And for those who are not present, I will send an email out to those members, essentially emphasizing this class is not one that you can just skip out on. There are group projects involved, and I'm going to start keeping tabs of attendance. I normally don't keep attendance. I let the grades just reflect attendance or watching the video or something, but I take these groups seriously on your behalf. You cannot coordinate with somebody who's just not here. So I will send a well-worded email. I think I'll send it to everyone in the class, but I will be addressing those. So everyone is essentially CC'd on this, but I will be specifically addressing the need to attend, and that this will have an impact on your groups and grades. So I will take care of that. I know you can see the list of attendees, and I know you must have concerns. I share those concerns. Anyway, 5-minute break. I'll see y'all in a little bit. All right, welcome back. Hope everyone had a nice little break here and talk about three different types of studies. They're kind of stacked up. The first is our initial implementation, which would be an exploratory study. From there, we can then move on to a descriptive study and finally an explanatory study. So let's take a look at these three layers of research. Just move things around a little bit on the screen here. All right. So an exploratory study basically means that you're totally new to the domain. You don't know where you are, you don't know who's there, and your job is to try to understand who's there and how many and what do they do and who are these people. And so you have a very open mind. Your job is to become familiar with the basic facts, the community, the individuals, the concerns. You have a completely open mind, tabula rasa. You don't know this area. And so you don't have any particular agenda other than the great three words that I heard. What does a therapist do? I had a wonderful supervisor ask me that once in my second year internship. I was, beats me. He says, you try to understand. 3 words. That's the clinical mission. Try to understand. I said, what if I don't understand? He said, then you ask questions until you do understand. And if you have a good concept of evidence-based practice, from there, you'll know everything right to do. Amazing. And he said, you know what? Another way to think of it is think of, and this pertains to exploratory study as well. He says, with all due respect, think of every client who comes to you as an alien who walked off a spaceship and they toddle up to you and they say, I speak English. You can ask me anything. What would you ask this person? Who are you? Where do you come from? What do you do? Who's there with you? What's it like where you're from? Your curiosity will take you to all the right places. And that's essentially what an exploratory study is. It's like the first time you meet with a client. All you have is a little bit of information that might have come through a briefing sheet, or maybe it's you doing the initial contact. This is what we're doing on a larger scale with an exploratory study, is trying to understand where are we and who's here and what do they have and what's important to them. The next is a descriptive study that now that we have some parameters pinned down, we can now start to ask some informed questions. We can ask, how many males, females? What are the age groups here? What do you do? Do you work? And then you can get into other questions like, what are the major problems here? What are the minor problems here? Is there substance abuse issues? Are there educational issues? Are there violence issues? And then we can start to do some counting and find out what's the prevalence of each of these things. And then finally, we get to explanatory studies where now that we know this population and we know what's going on, maybe we can come to understand what is leading to the high academic dropout rate. Why do we have 30% of high school students not earning a diploma? And we can ask these bigger questions and come up with explanations, and that could ultimately lead us to viable evidence-based practice interventions. So as you see, it's kind of a 3-layer process. Where are we? What goes on here? And then can we understand the dynamics of what's setting things into the direction that they're going? And we can think of this graphically here. This is kind of a fun picture. Just shuffle my screen a little bit, where the first layer is our exploratory study, where we have a low layer of knowledge, and then we move on to a descriptive study. We have gained more information and we're climbing this ladder. And then finally, we can have an explanatory model that finds the linkages and the rationales as to what is going on in this organization or community. So we can move from exploratory to explanatory. This is just another chart detailing that process. Okay, so for the group work, what we're going to do, the goal that I have in mind for you today is to continue with the, oh, hang on, I have to move my screen around again. There's a little screen attitude going on here. Okay, so what we're going to do today is continue in your groups. I'll put you in the breakout room shortly. And the big goal today is to, again, go through the SAT codebook document. The SWK 6402 survey codebook PDF is the same document. It's just, I think the DOC, the SAT codebook, is just a cleaner layout of the data. Same thing though, don't look for differences. And your goal is to ultimately identify the pairs of variables that your group will be using to do the literature review on, to build the research question, the corresponding hypothesis. This is going to be the foundation of the rest of the work that your group is going to do for assignments 2 through 4, including the statistical analysis. So for instance, let me just pull up the, there it is, there's the code book. So you should all have a copy of this, and presumably you've reviewed this and highlighted questions or possibly even pairs of questions that you think go together. And so here's the question, and here's the categories of checkbox choices that somebody could have made. Select one, and so on. And that goes all the way through to page 11 and question 75. So you're looking for questions that logically pair together. Like, for instance, you wouldn't ask something like, I think there's a question about, are you a part-time, full-time student? And then there's another question, is like, how clean do you find the restrooms? It's like, that's kind of an irrelevant pair of questions. You want to find something that's more relevant, like maybe something about the person's academic life and maybe something else in their life, or some attribute of the person, like their age or their gender or something like that, or full-time or part-time. So here's an example pairing, and I'm not promoting either of these. These are just examples that you could be thinking about. The question might be like Q4, are you a full-time or part-time student? And the responses are full-time or part-time. And then question 33, how many hours a week do you spend on schoolwork? That's a relevant pairing of questions. And later on, when the time comes, I'll show you how to run the calculation that would enable you to analyze the data between how many students, which of these are full-time, which are part-time, and is there a difference in how many hours this group worked compared to that group. We'll get to all that later. Main thing is find a good pair of questions that go together. Another pair of questions that you could be considering would be something like, question 32, what kind of a learner are you? Visual, oral, verbal, physical, other. And then question 30, how satisfied are you with the teaching styles of your professor? And that would be answered on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 not at all satisfied, and 5 extremely satisfied. And then when you run the analysis on that, maybe you're going to find that maybe visual learners seem to be more satisfied than, say, physical learners. And the rationale might turn out to be, well, we're all on screen now, and that screen is primarily visual. And I will show you what would be the appropriate calculation statistic to run for that. But for now, the big goal for your group is to settle on 2 pairs of variables, a total of 4 variables. Now, I'm not going to tie your hands that if you use one variable in one, like for instance, are you part-time or full-time? If you find something else that pairs with that answers a completely different question than question 1, I'm not going to say, oh, you can't recycle that variable, because when you pair it with something else, you're getting a different answer. And so I'm fine with that. If you want to go that way by coincidence or by design, I'm okay with that. So y'all understand what I'm asking you to do today is come closer, at least come out of this with at least 1 pair of variables and maybe a provisional pair. Work it through as a team, document your findings. And what I'll do is, we got 43 minutes left. I'll give you all but about 5 or 10, I'll give you about all but 5 of those minutes, because at the end, I want to come back and I want to hear from each of the groups what pairs you have initially come up with. Not to criticize you, but I want to make sure that they're pairs that have a logic to them that makes sense. This is really important, and I don't want you barking up the wrong tree. I want these to be pairs of variables that will serve your project well. So I want to double check that you're finding stuff that really, really works. So any questions on what we're going to be doing in groups today? Okay, so let me set off the breakout groups. This takes a moment to assign people to their rooms. Actually, I'm going to try it a different way. These are the groups that we've assigned. And instead of me assigning you to groups, I'm going to tell the processor to just put up 2 groups, and it should give you the opportunity to load into the appropriate group. So I'm going to do it that way and see how that works. If it's not working, I'll fix it. We'll do it another way. So let me set this up for 2 breakout rooms, and it should label them 1 and 2. And I'm going to let participants choose their room. And I'll give you, like I say, we're at about 40 minutes left. I'll give you 35 minutes, and then we'll return here and talk about what you've got. And if you need me, I think you can, there's a summons button, you can notify me. I'll be here. So here we go. And this should be giving the choice to assign yourself to a room. Is that what's working? Okay, so you do that, and I'll see you in about 30 minutes or so.
It doesn't look like I have an option to join a group. I'm not seeing anything on my.
I don't either. I don't have that.
Okay, let me see if I can, let's see. I'm going to put you in group 1. And let's see, you go to group 2.
Thank you.
All right.
variable that we chose was Q4, which is whether a student is full-time or part-time, and a comparison of with Q15, which is how many hours are spent on family responsibility. The second one, which was more similar to that, was Q3, which is which program are you attending, meaning to say like whether you're in the block program, full-time, part-time, online, etc. With Q14, which is how much family responsibilities do you have, which is a three-part answer of none, a some, or a great deal. And so we're going to explore some different variables to find something that is a bit more different than the first one that we had chosen.
Sure. So good work on finding that first pair. I think that's a meaningful pair that's going to reveal some interesting literature about the life of students in light of family commitments. And yes, the second question was just conceptually a little bit too close. And there's such a grand variety of variables here. I want you to be able to find another pair. And my advice to the group on my brief visit was for each person to commit to studying this list of questions. And everybody come back next week when we do this again for the breakout rooms. And this is the instruction for anyone, the other group, if it didn't get both pinned down. Come back with 2 or 3 pairs of recommendations and your rationale for why you think that would be the good go. And I think that should expedite us to hopefully by next week nailing down what are your 2 research questions, and that's going to kick off the literature review process very nicely and inform the statistics you're going to run. So thank you. Excellent effort to get that pair pinned down. Keep a note of that. That's keeper stuff, and keep shopping for those other variables. And can I have a representative for the other group to speak of where you landed and what you came up with?
Okay, I don't mind. We decided to do 8 and 18. So it is what age? What is your age at your last birthday? And you are on a scale of 1 to 5. How much emotional support do you feel you are receiving from your family members?
Okay, so that'll give a clue on analysis, just looking down the road. Do people get about the same support from their family at all ages, or do younger or older tend to get more support from their family? Okay, and the only question here is support is a little bit of a vague term. Is this emotional support? Is this financial support?
We like that though.
Yeah, I mean, it's open. It's open
Yes.
to interpretation of the people who answered it, and it's open to your analytics of that. Okay, that's a viable pairing of questions.
Actually,
And
what we saw in 18, it does say with emotional.
It's-
We did
it
discuss
specifies, yeah.
and we did discuss the fact that it's a subjective in the nature on there. So what I was thinking is the way I was thinking of wording that, and let me go ahead, what I just typed was, how does the student's age influence the amount of emotional support they receive from the families or perceive they receive? And the question uses a Likert scale with 1 through 5, with none at all with 1, and 5 being a great deal of support.
right. And forgive me, I highlighted 19 instead of 18, which is, you're right, it's a more specific question. So I think that pair is going to work. And did you get that? Thank you. That's all good thinking. And we'll refine the research question and the corresponding hypothesis as we move forward. And but you're off to a good start on that first pair. That's excellent progress. Did you get to the second pair, or is that still in question?
We were looking at questions 4 and 13, so that how does the number of children a student has influence their choice of full-time or part-time student status at the school?
Okay, so 4, which is full-time, part-time, and 13, how many children? Interesting. That could definitely work. And the analysis will tell us on it's a preview of coming attractions. It would be a t-test analysis. And now we have 2 groups, and it'll give the average of how many children in the household for part-timers and the average number of children in full-timer households. And we're going to see, Are those about the same, or is there a statistically significant difference? Are one group older than the other in a meaningful way? Interesting stuff. So I'd say your group is absolutely ready to kick off the literature review, gathering data about children in households of full-time and part-time. If you can't find articles that include full-time, part-time student status and number of children in the household, then you need to do two separate searches. What do we know about people who opt for full-time, part-time program? And what do we know about how many children students today tend to have? So, and then as for the other group, you're absolutely good to go on beginning the literature research for the two variables that you've already locked down on. Yes, question.
I just wanted to, I guess, confirm my understanding, right? We don't have to just look at social work students, right? If we find an on-point study for medical students, for example, about the number of children, that's something that we could sort of draw some comparisons from.
Well, since this was drawn from social work students, I will encourage you to focus on including that as part of your search term. However, it's a big leap to think that those questions have been answered for social work students. So if that search fails, you do what you do in any time a search fails, is remove a specifier to open the door wider to more papers. Because logically, just the semantics of a search, every time you say this and that, I want left-handed and they're Eskimos and they're social work students. Every time you say and, your sample size gets trimmed down further. And if it gets down to nothing or so small that you don't have much to select from, start throwing away search terms and then watch it broaden up. Does that make sense? Okay.
I would also think that there's nothing significantly different between a social work student and a medical student, engineering student, in the sense that, well, a social work student with X number of kids is less likely to attend this amount of hours of school compared to a business major.
It's a reasonable curiosity, but we can't make those claims until we actually look at the literature. And it's questions and thinking like that that drive our research, our curiosity, and our presumptions. And I've been pleased to be surprised by outcomes in light of what I thought was going on. We're right at end time. I don't want to keep you an extra minute. Good work, everyone. Keep going forward. Keep well. Do the good things. Enjoy what's left of the weekend. Yeah, question. Anything? No, nothing. Okay, just a bye-bye. Okay, good. Okay, well, everyone keep well, and I look forward to seeing y'all next time. Bye now.